You're listening to the Hansi Comprehensive Exam podcast from hansicomprehensiveexam.com. I'm your host, Lindsay Oden. Okay, welcome to episode 15 of the Hansi Comprehensive Exam podcast. I'm back here with my loyal co-host, Bonnie. Say hi.
Hi, everyone. It's been a while, but I'm happy to be back.
All right, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about the accomplishments of millennials, and not in the we're going to quote a bunch of statistics way, but I think we're going to give a couple personal narratives because what I've seen in the last couple weeks is a lot of these videos being shared on Facebook and Twitter and other platforms and even showing up on some mainstream news sites. And they're videos of usually millennials talking into a camera and really voicing their discontent with our generation. And I've seen a lot of these and they question the work ethic of millennials. They question our attitude. They question what we do with technology. They question our self-centeredness. They question our narcissism. And I think it's incredibly unfair to have grouped an entire generation of people into this overarching term called millennial. And I think it's important, too, that we give a kind of counter-narrative that pushes back against what these videos have been saying and what these so-called critics have been leveling against millennials. So, Bonnie, that's why I've asked you here to be on the pod today, other than you would normally co-host. I think I want to address this more to our experience as millennials. Does that?
Okay.
And so we're going to tell a couple stories from our own personal lives. I think we come from two very different perspectives on this because as you'll get to, you never went to college, but you have a career now. I did go to college and then I went to graduate school and I have a career now. And so we really are spanning the two poles that seem to be what a lot of this criticism revolves around, is that millennials are entitled and they're lazy and they're self-centered.
Right. And I think, honestly, the deeper criticism of millennials, because, a lot of it focuses around these sort of surface arguments, like they're lazy, they have low work ethic, et cetera, et cetera. But I think really the heart of the issue is that older generations don't think that millennials are equipped with the life skills to fend for themselves and be independent, because that's really what this comes down to. And when you hear a lot of these criticisms of millennials, like, for instance, they can't take criticism because they were all given trophies for participating, for example. I think that is really a more veiled sort of criticism of... It almost, honestly, to me, it almost feels like it's linked hand in hand with this new hatred of political correctness, where it seems like the older generations really shun sensitivity in any way, shape, or form. And I feel like as we undergo societal progress, obviously with each new generation, we become more interconnected, more empathetic with one another. The walls between people are starting to break down as far as youth becoming very involved in more progressive political platforms than ever before. I think a lot of this is really boiling down to the issue of older generations and their sort of scorn for what they see as any kind of sensitivity.
And can we just say that the older generation that is currently criticizing us, first of all, they're the ones who gave us the participation trophies.
That's very true.
They're the ones who elected Reagan and Bush too, and fucked the economy and made it hard for us to earn a living wage and get jobs.
Right.
And they were criticized by the generation that came before them. We think of the World War II generation as condemning the social movements of the 1960s and 70s. And then the people who came of age in the 60s and 70s, they elected Reagan. They attacked the social movements of the 1980s and early 90s, including things like the crime bill.
Right.
And then you have
so the
our
point that
generation.
you're making is that this is really nothing new. Like, this is a cycle that's gone on for generation after generation. And I think the reason why it seems so much more prevalent now is just because due to technology and social media, et cetera, everybody has a much more accessible platform to voice their opinions, but these are the same opinions that have been circulating for,
It's absolutely nothing new.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't require some kind of pushback from people like you and me.
Of course.
And I think I might speak for a lot of millennials here. I don't know. I don't really claim to speak for a lot of them, but I think that I do. And we're tired of this shit, where people keep condemning us, not only for things that they did when they were our age, but also for kneecapping us by hurting us in the economy, by causing the economic crash, by electing Reagan and the Bushes. It is absolutely their fault that we are in the economic position that we are in today. And I think that needs pushback. And let's start first. I want to ask you, and then we can transition and talk about me at the end a little bit. But I want to talk to you specifically. What do you think, as a 21-year-old millennial, what is your proudest accomplishment to date?
So ultimately, I would have to say, looking at the broad spectrum of my life, my proudest accomplishment is in finding independence and a pathway to success that is very different from the one that I envisioned as a child and as a teenager growing up through high school. Obviously, I always thought that I would be that kid who would graduate with straight A's, go on to get a degree from a 4-year university, possibly go on to graduate school. I had a lot of success in the debate circle. As I was a high school student, I was able to rack up enough points to qualify for state and nationals my very first year. So that sort of sparked an interest in law. I was kind of thinking maybe I would be a lawyer or something to that effect. But what ended up happening was I had won several $1,000s worth of scholarships to start attending a local college, but due to some kind of, gosh, it's kind of hard for me to remember now. It was so many years back, but due to some kind of error in the financial sector office or in the financial aid office, what ended up happening was we had to come up with about $1,500 collectively from my family on a very short notice that was due in just a couple weeks, or else I was not going to be able to attend classes. And of course, we weren't able to come up with the money. I had to call back, return all my scholarships. I had to turn them down. I was not able to attend college. And just a couple weeks later, I started working at an American Eagle, which is just a clothing retail store at the local mall. And after that, of course, life happened. I got married. I moved to Las Vegas. I had pretty low self-esteem as far as what I had to contribute to the career force because of the fact that I had only worked retail. I was very demoralized from not being able to go to college. You know, I was sort of wallowing in this existential sort of crisis of being an 18-year-old and not really knowing what I was doing.
And you were making near minimum wage.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't making any money.
And you were part-time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just didn't really see any pathway to the lifestyle that I had envisioned for myself, which obviously included living independently, being able to support myself, being able to pursue hobbies comfortably, and everything like that. So for years, I worked in the retail sector, and I was working at Victoria's Secret, and I worked really, really hard, obviously, and I sometimes was working 50, 60-hour weeks, or especially around the holidays. I just remember like really pushing myself, but I was really pretty miserable in my job as just sort of a cog in the capitalist machine. I didn't really connect that well to my work environment. I just always felt a little bit out of place, and like it was always just a way, sort of a time filler until I felt like I was qualified to do something else.
Well, and if I can interject as well, despite how many hours you were working, which were, by the way, very inconsistent, that some weeks you would work 20 and some weeks you would work 55.
Right. I never knew what position I was going to be in financially from one week to the next.
Exactly. That's the thing, is no matter how many hours you worked, we never felt like we were getting ahead.
No.
Because they weren't paying you enough.
Right. And so I went through this for years and years, and finally, I remember one conversation that I had with a friend that really inspired me, and she was talking to me and she was like, man, I just don't understand why so many people wake up every day and just go out and do a bunch of shit that they don't want to do. And I was thinking about that and how it applied to my life, and I was like, man, you're really right. Like, I hate going to work every day, and this is every single day of my life for the foreseeable future, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I ended up quitting my job, and I took a gamble on applying for some kind of office position that I felt like I was completely underqualified for. And I started out working for $11 an hour just as basically as a communications assistant in a call routing center. And I was promoted after a very short period of time just because I was so grateful for that job and the luxuries and the comfort for me, like having my own desk. Being able to do something as simple as drink a latte at my desk while I was working seemed like an unfathomable luxury after working at Victoria's Secret and sometimes having to go 18, 20-hour shifts, sometimes without a break, very inconsistent hours. I guess what I'm really trying to get at is that I was so grateful for my office position that even though it was entirely unspectacular on paper, it was still what it signified to me, I think, more than anything, was sort of a leap of faith on my part that I thought that I was capable of contributing something a little bit more important than folding underwear to the world. And after a very short period of time, I was promoted. I'm now a mentor in that position. I'm on track to become a supervisor, potentially double my salary within the next year. And I really feel like this entire experience has taught me so much about valuing my own day-to-day happiness and sort of what I'm willing to do and what I'm willing to endure as far as terms of discomfort. Switching careers is always, a very uncomfortable thing to do. There's a lot of uncertainty that comes along with it. But it was a gamble that paid off so well that it's definitely going to affect how I make similar decisions in the future.
So, if I was an outside observer of
Mhm.
this conversation, I might say, you sound really entitled. Like you weren't willing to do the work in the retail sector and you were unhappy. Well, work is a part of life and life isn't fair. How would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I absolutely was willing to do the work, and I did. For 4 years, I worked in retail, and I did very, very well. And every single one of the managers that I worked for would tell you that I was a hard worker,
And you were
that
promoted while you're at Victoria's Secret.
oh, multiple times.
Yeah.
And any manager of mine would tell you that when a last minute, like if somebody got sick or something and called out last minute, that I was always the person that they could call and I would be there in 20 minutes and I would stay until they told me to leave. And that's the reputation that was very important for me to build for myself as a worker. And ultimately, I think a lot of those references came back to help me get the job that I wanted or the job that I felt was better suited to me in the long run. But addressing, I think what you were really getting at, which is, I sound entitled. I think, because I can understand how an outside observer listening to this conversation would be like, oh, this girl thinks that she's too good for retail. And that's not it at all. I don't think that anyone is too good for any job, and I'm very glad that I was able to spend the time that I did working at a low-wage hourly job and having to deal with the public because it definitely not only gave me an appreciation for the job that I have now and helps me be more successful because I'm more motivated to do well because of the fact that I love it so much, but it also gave me a much better appreciation for everyone who is in the service industry. So when I go into a restaurant, for instance, the way that I treat my waiter is very different for having worked in the service industry. And that's sort of shaped my thinking and how I deal with the public in general. And it's definitely given me skills that I will use for the rest of my life. So I don't think that I'm not, I wouldn't say that I think that I'm too good for retail, but I think that it was an important stepping stone.
I'm going to play a little bit harder than you are because you're saying that you appreciated the job that you had, even though it wasn't something that you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to push back against that and say, why do we have to settle for these shitty jobs? It's absolutely insane that the older generation is asking us to settle for these garbage jobs that they gave us and then to say, why aren't you happy with it? Why aren't we happy with it? How about because you don't pay us a living wage? How about because these part-time jobs don't give us health benefits? How about because these part-time jobs suck our life force out of us and make us unhappy? Now, if you say that's entitled, I'd say good. Maybe we should be a little bit more entitled. We should act a little more entitled so we can demand jobs that are good for us, jobs that are good for society, jobs that provide us the things that we need, not just an hourly wage that almost pays the rent. But how about an hourly wage that does pay the rent and then some? How about we are allowed to save a little bit at the end of every month instead of scrambling and taking out credit card debt and having to room with people we don't like or live in places that are not as good a place for us to live? So this is like when I hear your story, and of course I lived it right here as your partner, and I remember you coming home every day from work and being unhappy. And not talking badly about your job, but having an overall demeanor that was beaten down, especially during the Christmas season when you would come home after 18 hours completely exhausted. And I don't even know how many labor laws that breaks, but just that why do we have to settle for something that is wrong with society? Why do we have to accept these jobs that are not good for us? And that's why, like, people might listen to this and think that you're entitled, and I think we should be entitled. We are entitled to something better, so maybe we should work for it.
Well, I don't think that being entitled is, or having a feeling of entitlement is a negative thing so long as it produces a positive result in your life. So, yeah, you could say that I did feel entitled to a higher quality of living, and that's exactly what motivated me to take the initiative and go out of my way to improve it and take that gamble, take a step, apply for a job I didn't think I was qualified for, but use that sort of confidence boost and use that feeling of entitlement to say, yes, I'm as worthy of this as anyone else, and I'm going to give it my best shot. And because of that, I've been able to rise very quickly, and I now wake up every day and I can't wait to go to work, and I love it.
Yeah,
And
because God forbid you enjoy your job and you don't just settle for something because it pays you a wage.
right.
That's what alienates us, is that the previous generation, which was enjoying, by the way, the fruits of the 1950s, they were enjoying the most prosperous decades in American history, and then they look at us in the shadow of the Great Recession and they say, why aren't you as happy as we were? You know what? When you get to live in the best decades in American history for white people, let's clarify, for white people, and then you look down at us because we're discontented. Well, guess what? We don't have any labor unions anymore. We don't have a wage that is livable anymore. Everything is stagnated. That doesn't make us entitled. That makes us victimized by history. And I don't know, maybe I just have a bad attitude about this, but I'm just absolutely sick of everybody shitting on us when it's just like, oh, old people don't like young people. Oh, well, also the old people are the ones who screwed us. So I don't know. Maybe we can cut this out. I kind of enjoy it. I'm having a good time. I want to press you a little bit more about your current job. So you said you work in an office, you're a mentor, you have your own desk, you get to work with people, you get to see improvement in their day-to-day abilities, and then that, of course, reflects positively on you. Tell us a little bit about how your bosses at your new job have responded to your work.
I mean, the difference is really night and day, and I feel so appreciated for the job that I do at my work now that it makes me want to do an even better job. And I think that up to this point, at least, they've been very good at rewarding and recognizing when I do sort of put in the extra work. And I feel like that's one of the things that excites me so much about this job is that there's really no cap to how far I can make it. It totally depends on just what I put into it.
The entire point of this is to say that millennials have something to be proud of. Millennials work hard. We enjoy the fruits of our labor when they are available to us. And one of the things you always tell me about your new job is how proud you are of the work that you get to do. And then the benefit of that is having people who also appreciate the work that you do. And I think that's important. It can't be overstated. You felt alienated at your old job, and now you feel much closer to the labor that you're currently doing. Right? How can you deny that? Tell me the one thing that you do every day at work which makes you happy or proud.
I think probably the one thing that I do every day that makes it worth it to come into work is just the level to which I'm able to connect with other people and simultaneously tear down their whatever pride hangups might be keeping them from being receptive to my teaching. And then once I have them in a vulnerable place, I'm able to build them back up and restore their confidence and sort of rebuild them in the right direction.
Because your job is to take people who are struggling at the job.
Right.
And then to coach them until they can improve. Right. And so what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is that what makes you proud to go to work is that you go and your job gives you something where at the end of the day, you have a tangible result to look at.
Absolutely.
You can look at how the people that you've been mentoring improve, and then
Mhm.
you improve the overall quality of the entire office when you do that.
Right. And so what I do is, for instance, I work with a lot of young people and a lot of millennials. Of course, a lot of people coming in, starting out where I started out as communications assistants out on the floor. And I find that a lot of the time with these young people and these millennials, they don't feel entitled at all. What I see more often is very typically a lack of self confidence, very similar to the one that I had when I very first started, and I felt like I was underqualified. So I see a lot of people who have very defensive reactions to me when I very first start working with them because they see my being there as a punishment to them. And that sort of aggravates the self consciousness and sort of inflames all of the insecurities that they already have about being there. And so I think that's really what I enjoy the most, just taking people who feel like their confidence is stalling and maybe they're lashing out or being defensive toward me because they're sort of taking out those insecurities. If I can take all of that and just basically strip it down to nothing and say, no matter what you think you're capable of or what you're not, like I'm here to tell you, I'm going to take you from point A and put you in point B, and all you have to do is just trust me and do what I tell you to do. And when I see people as they sort of realize their own abilities and as they exceed their own expectations of what they ever thought that they were capable of doing, I think that's honestly what makes it the most gratifying because I know that they are headed for, that to be reflected in every aspect of their life. It's not just about like this one skill that I'm necessarily helping to communicate to them as much as it is me telling them that, no matter what you are trying to do, if you can master your own insecurities first and get that out of the way and focus on just basically putting one foot in front of the other and completing the necessary steps, then you are going to be fine. So,
And that's what makes your job worthwhile.
absolutely.
Let's take a commercial break
All right.
real quick.
All right.
And then we'll come back because I've really enjoyed the conversation that we've had so far.
Okay,
And
good.
I know that's really self-serving because I'm kind of leading the conversation, but I am really enjoying it. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
All right.
Hey, it's Lindsay here at Intermission. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at HCELindsay. That's HCELINDSAY. Don't forget to like the Handsy Comprehensive Exam Facebook page at facebook.com/Handsy Comprehensive Exam. Email the show, handsycompexam@gmail.com. Be on the lookout for new music tracks for my music project Disciplinary Boundaries. Visit soundcloud.com/disciplinary-boundaries. And of course, follow the Handsy Comprehensive Exam website at handsycomprehensiveexam.com. Let's get back to the show. And we're back from our brief intermission. Go ahead and transition to the second part of the episode. Bonnie, would you please take it away?
Lindsay, what is your proudest accomplishment?
So I did have to think about this, but I think ultimately it's pretty obvious. I am very proud of getting my master's degree in 2 years and passing my comprehensive exams with highest honors. I think I was really happy with that, but
Now, hold on. Let me just clarify. When was the last time someone passed comps with highest honors?
at the master's level, my advisor said she didn't remember anybody doing that.
Anybody. And how
Anybody.
long has she?
I don't know. She's been there at least a decade. Yeah. And so I was really proud of that accomplishment for like 5 to 10 minutes because it was really ephemeral for me. I kind of received an email with the results of my exams, and I was pretty stoked about it. But when I came out of my exams, I was absolutely convinced that I had failed because when I took the exams and I did all the writing, I wrote for over the course of 2 days, I wrote for 6 hours during the exams, and I felt like I had failed. I honestly did. I thought I had turned in 3 essays worth of word vomit, and that it was only very scattered and not well written, and I was really afraid that I had failed. I really was.
This sounds a lot like me before I kicked your ass on the SATs.
Well, exactly. Kicking my ass on the SATs. which you did, and I was very proud of you for doing. But
He says with a smile.
when I took the exams, I really thought that I had failed. I really, really did. I was so nervous, and I felt like I had done a bad job. And I think when I went in there, I had very little self-confidence in my abilities because and I've written about this before, I felt like an imposter, that I was doing nothing but parading myself around as something that I wasn't. And that I felt like the comprehensive exams would finally expose me. I did 5 years of undergrad and I did pretty well, and I came here and I did 2 years of grad school and I did very well, and I thought, like, any moment now it all has to end. They're finally going to find me out that I don't work nearly as hard as everybody says I do, and I'm not as accomplished as everybody seems to think that I am, and all of these things. So that was a big moment for me, passing the exams with highest honors, and getting that email and looking at it and really feeling that I'd finally overcome my imposter syndrome, only to figure out like a couple days later that I was still suffering from it pretty badly by saying I didn't deserve those marks. I really didn't believe that I did. I think then I took a lot of pride at the graduation ceremony, which is a huge buildup, by the way. You sit there for 3 hours and it takes you like 4 or 5 seconds to cross the stage, like shake everybody's hand. It's a super loose handshake because they've already seen, several thousand students march in front of them. So you have this real weak handshake with these 3 people, and then they hand you a fake diploma and say, welcome to the Alumni Association. And then you walk off the stage, and that takes 5 seconds. What I felt really proud of after that was as we were exiting the graduation ceremony, and there were several members of the history department, including my advisor, standing in the exit tunnel. And I shook their hands as I went by, and they seemed very excited for me to have done that. And I felt I took a tremendous amount of pride being able to look them in the eyes after finishing. And so I think that's what I'm most proud of. So yeah, I guess when I think back at the kinds of criticisms that are leveled at millennials, and how people say that we're going to be lifelong college students, and that we don't know what the real world is like and all of that stuff, I don't care. Because when I look at what I accomplished when I went to school, I feel very strongly that I proved my worth, and that when I graduated, I felt vindicated to some degree. Now, I still feel like an imposter a lot, especially when I read some of my own writing. I just cringe a little bit, but apparently some people think it's kind of good.
Well, and I mean, it must be kind of vindicating as well. Obviously, you came back, you were offered a full-time position by the university. This upcoming year will be your second year working as full-time staff. You're on the faculty at the
I'm
university.
not on the faculty.
Okay.
But I am full-time staff.
Full-time staff, working at the university library. So I think that really does put you in sort of a slim upper majority. I believe particularly a lot of people that graduate with liberal arts degrees such as history, political science, etc., the degrees that you have, I think, have a very hard time breaking into the workforce.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And so you've definitely been helped out quite a bit by the fact that, of course, you established a great reputation for yourself at the university, and your name is very well known. So you've definitely helped yourself out, and you have a lot to be proud of.
I think I worked hard, even if I don't believe that I worked hard. I think I ultimately did work hard. But this is not to say that my experience is normal. I don't think it is. I think a lot of millennials, even those people with master's degrees, are struggling to get jobs. And I think that's unfair. I think that if you are highly educated and highly qualified, that there should be a job waiting for you somewhere to do something.
Well, I read a really distressing statistic the other day that said something like 50% of Americans could not handle a $400 emergency.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's because we don't make enough money to have anything in savings. So
right.
that when something pops up, like a car breakdown or a medical emergency or any number of things that people would be driven into dire financial straits by not having any money left over, I think millennials probably make up a huge percentage of that. And it's not for lack of work. It's not for lack of trying. It's not for lack of education. It's because the economy is set against us.
Right. And so when I read things like that, it really does reassure me quite a bit because, of course, as a young person, I am very inclined to compare my current living standards to that of my parents after they had already established themselves in their career after decades of working in their chosen fields. So it's very easy for me to look around and be like, oh, we live in this, smallish condo. we don't have our own home. We're not, we don't have, we're not driving Ferraris. Like, what's the deal? Like, we work hard. We
Is
should
that
be.
the baseline now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got a Ferrari minimum standard baseline. But ultimately, it's like when I read statistics like that, it kind of puts it in perspective. And I realize that even as millennials who really don't know what we're doing, I mean, you and I have learned all of our financial management skills from basically making terrible mistakes and vowing to never make them again. But I do feel that we are very lucky, to be in the position that we are, which is at least to be financially independent. I mean, I'm 21, Lindsay's 25. We're, independent from our parents. We're not reliant on them for,
anything really. I think what's important is to say that millennials cannot be grouped together. And I'm not saying that I'm not one of them. I am absolutely saying I am one of them. That we are a few months away from a disaster at any point. And I want to make it clear that my experience is not emblematic of what most millennials face, but it absolutely contravenes the criticism that most millennials come under. Because when people say that we don't have a work ethic or we're too entitled, what really bothers me is that I have a ton of peers who are doing quite well for themselves. And I think my experience is that I went and I got into a lot of student loan debt, and I'm going to be paying it off for the next 25 years. But at the same time, it's absolutely critical for a person like me to have gone to college in order to get the kind of work that I wanted to get. And so the criticism against us is completely unfair. And at the same time, I feel incredibly lucky because I succeeded at what I chose to succeed at, and I feel very fortunate. Now, that's not to dismiss the millions of millennials who are suffering because the economy is stacked against them. And I understand that, and I acknowledge it freely. I freely acknowledge it. But the criticism against us is absolutely, it doesn't make any sense, considering not only your experience and my experience, but the experience of millions of us who work hard and still get nothing. And so, even though my proudest accomplishment is graduating from graduate school and doing quite well in college, I feel as though it's not completely. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I understand that my experience is not completely normal. That there are a lot of millennials who are in my position and yet don't have a path through their field that they chose to study. So for that reason, I do feel very fortunate. But I also feel as though because the economy is stacked against us, that we have to acknowledge the ways in which our different experiences are all united by one thing. And that one thing that unites us is definitely alienation and capitalism. And I'm not afraid to say that. I think there are a lot of people who waffle and say that, oh, capitalism isn't that bad, blah, blah, blah. No, this is exactly what we should expect in late stage capitalism, that there are more unemployed people than there are available jobs. Now, how can you answer that? How can you call us lazy when there are less jobs available than there are people to work them? That even if we had 100% employment, there would still be unemployed people because there would be zero jobs available for them. Whose fault is that? It's not a millennial's fault. And so when I think about my own education and my own experience and my own luck being able to get the internship that I got that ultimately got me the position that I'm in now, I think that does come partially from my hard work, which contravenes the criticisms of millennials, and it also comes partially from luck because the economy is not set in our favor. And that also contravenes the criticism that comes against us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So my proudest accomplishment as a millennial is succeeding, to this point, succeeding in my field, but also being a millennial who proudly proclaims that we are part of a greater system and that my individual success does not vindicate the criticisms of millennials. I worked hard. I know a lot of millennials who also work hard and are not in as good a situation as I am, and it makes me absolutely sick to hear these stupid straw man criticisms leveled against us as if we aren't trying, as if we don't care. We are entitled to better, and I think we should agitate for that.
Very well said. Very well said.
So, I don't want to talk too much more about myself. So let's go ahead and just move straight into recommendations. Bonnie, please give us your recommendation.
All right, so my recommendation is going to have to be the latest Quentin Tarantino movie that came out. It's called The Hateful Eight. I would highly recommend anyone who is even remotely interested in Quentin Tarantino or in history to watch it.
Makes me die a little bit on the inside. To hear
Lindsay,
you say
Quentin
that.
Tarantino is the greatest historian of our time. And you know it's true.
Oh my.
All of his films are 100% accurate to history. That shit really happened.
Oh, all right. Well, my recommendation is the latest White House Correspondents' Dinner presentation given by President Barack Obama.
Oh,
Because, for all the fair criticisms that I've leveled against Obama, there is one absolute truth about him, is that he's been screwed at every turn by the reactionaries in this country, and that his last White House Correspondents' Dinner speech was so well written to satirize the kinds of people who have stood against him. And not only does he give really funny criticism of the Republican primaries, but also his indictments of all the people who have stood against him in the past 8 years is quite funny. So if you can, track that down. I'll put a link into the show notes, but I think you shouldn't have a difficult time trying to find it. It's probably going to be all over the news over the next week. So hopefully you enjoy that. Thank you, Bonnie, for having another episode with me.
Thank you for having me.
I would have you on every episode if you would just come whenever I scheduled one.
I'll see if I can pencil you in.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening to this episode, and we will see you again later. Thanks for listening to the Hansi Comprehensive Exam podcast. Be sure to follow the blog at hansicomprehensiveexam.com.